So basically we are helping prepare the people, right, that we have to get to know mentally, how to deal with setbacks or how to respond to certain situations, right?
Can I just say, sorry, Chris, can I just say,
please.
Sorry. Also, what I would say is, because I didn't touch on Phil Jackson with the Bulls, that's probably one of the best examples. I mean, Phil Jackson had to coach a guy like Michael Jordan. How do you do this? So many trophies won. So he had to find a way. And, you know, it was all about, at some point, helping the team become grower. It's not about the individual. It's about, you know, the objective of the team, the common goal. So we'll touch base with it, but it's also about goal setting. And for a player like Michael Jordan, how can you motivate a player like this? So mental preparation is about motivation as well for some individuals, some participants of the sport. So you have to find ways to deal with individual players, but as well deal with team. And with it being said, when it comes to a team, you have to find ways to calm the team. You have to find ways to help them work together as a unit. So for that, Phil Jackson introduced various different techniques of meditation, of focusing of the key and what's important in the performance.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. So looking at the individual, but how the collective works as well, right? So for those that know me, I have 3 boys and 2 of them play. And it's okay to mention that they're meeting with Fabs. And last night, 2 nights ago, I was just talking to Fabrice yesterday, but my youngest son, Nico, comes to me. He says to me, Dad, I don't know whether this is a question for you or for a conversation to have with Fabrice in our next conversation. He says, sometimes when I play, I feel like I'm above and I'm looking down and it's got a zoom lens. So you want to talk about some of those situations, conversations, and just thoughts on how to give players confidence or coping mechanisms or...
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different tools. But I mean, first of all, and we touched based on it, it's about relationship building. I mean, a player is another individual. And, you know, with it being said, you've got the athlete, but you've also got, you know, the person. Where are they coming from in their life? But also, are they at school? Are they at work? Are they working? So what's the schedule in terms of their routine in their life? So you have to take this as a very important factor. And like I said, building the relationship, you know, making sure that we touch base on it again, Chris, it's not about yourself. If you are a sports performance coach or any coach out there, I mean, I, you know, did that mistake at the very beginning of my football coaching career. I was just looking at myself and there was a little bit of ego. So I think it's about, you know, realizing who is at the center of the equation. So there's so many different parameters that we can look at in mental performance. I don't know if you want to get into those details, Chris, but one of the things that we look at is the cognitive ability, whether, you know, you can concentrate and where are some of the challenges to regain concentration. So we also have abilities called the psychosomatic kind of abilities, you know, relaxation, activation, putting your body in a kind of swing for real activity or reducing that level of activity within your body, stress control, managing stress and, you know, managing fear as well. So, and there's also a lot of basic foundation, I'd call them, application to mental preparation, confidence, commitment, goal setting, which I've touched base on already.
Yeah. So I think if we're to give our audience something simple and basic, right, how would we go about, you know, I've got this player, he seems, or she seems, they seem very tense before the game, whether it's the car ride home, whether it's a visualization technique, whether it's a, you know, talk us through that a little bit so we can have some strategies where people can visualize and then actualize and then, you know, whether it's self-talk, whether...
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, like I said before, there would have had to be an interview, a discussion between myself and the athlete. But on taking on the example that you touched based on, I would say that if there's some nervousness in the car as part of the journey, you need to look at what are some of the components that make someone maybe anxious or stressed, because it's two different things. And you can put in place what we call performance routine, which will help you cope with that anxiety that you could have or that stress that you can have. So performance routine is in effect, you finding activities which you're going to put in place with the athlete so that the athlete, the person in question, can put those strategies in place as part of their journey en route to their performance. So just one thing I would say is, when it comes to performance, I think there's three key phases to consider. There's the pre-phase, which is the anticipation phase. There's the action, so you doing your performance. And there's the reinforcement phase or the feedback phase. So all of these phases are important. And through discussion with the athletes, you kind of need to pinpoint where exactly the performance could be jeopardized.
Yeah, so the pre-activity, the action, the feedback. So before, during, after.
Correct.
Right? Before, during, after, if we were going to put it in the FA DNA terms. So now, if you have a player that struggles with confidence, right? Or let's just say this, not that they struggle with confidence, but they continually look at the 2 things they did wrong instead of the 8 things that went well. You know, how do we steer or zoom in the lens, right, to get them to focus on the positive?
Well, again, there'll have to be an element of discussion. And what's important is also, how does that athlete look at himself? So if you look at the post-performance or the feedback stage, it's about self-image. So the self-image is pretty much how you look at yourself. And there's within that self-image, there's 2 elements. There's the inner self-image, so what you think about yourself, but on the inside. And then there's looking at the mirror. So we need to establish whether, because you touched on confidence, whether the self-image could potentially impact on, you know, the person's self-esteem. And if the person's self-esteem is in jeopardy, then that can impact on the confidence. So that's just one way to look at it. Not to get into too much psychology, but you have to understand self-image, which the person is attaching themselves to. I'd say that's one thing. The other element that I would mention is, when it comes to this performance, one of the strategies that can be put in place is imagery rehearsal. So imagery rehearsal includes visualization. It's not exactly the same thing, because you've got various different levels. Within imagery rehearsal, you've got visualization, you've got what you hear, what you feel, you know, what you can test, what you can smell. So one way to increase confidence would be to have activities or strategies aimed at allowing for the athlete to have those kind of session of imagery rehearsal based on previous past positive experience. So if I was to talk to you, for instance, I would say, oh, well, Chris, can you recall an instant, a moment where, you know, you played your game, you had a really good game. How did that feel? Where was it? Who was around? What can you see? Can you see this image quite clearly? Can you actually feel a little bit of emotion? Can you hear, was there some noise in the background? So you'll want to get into imagery rehearsal, but based on past positive experience. And of course, attached to this, you would have, you know, self-talk, how that person sees themselves and assess their own performance. So if you look at the way I've taken this, I've kind of broken this down. I've started from the post, and I started from the self-image, which is pretty much feedback reinforcement stage. Then I went into kind of, if you look at the action itself, it could be about self-talk, but the action itself could be linked to the imagery rehearsal. And of course, before the actual action, you also need to have that component of self-talk, reinforcing how we talk about ourselves, how we look at ourselves, which is more to do with conscious. So just to simplify, the pre is anything to do with the conscious state that you're in. The during the performance, this is more kind of subconscious. Everything that you do in whatever practice, whatever activity that you do is subconscious imprint, it's subconscious knowledge that you've acquired over the years. And then the last component is more to do with kind of self-image. And throughout the journey, throughout all those three components, you can build on confidence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. You actually gave me an idea, and we didn't discuss this yesterday, but maybe we could pick somebody in the audience, right, and do a little bit of role playing. You know, take it, say, hey, we'll go, you know, what are some of the questions you ask in your first, let's see if we got a volunteer first, or somebody will volunteer. Fabs, actually, let me see if you're up for it first.
Yeah, go for it,
and then, you know, quick, like, speed, hey, this is what the first session looks like, okay, and then ask some of the questions you just asked. I love the way, though, that you tap into previous experience, but then bringing in the senses, right? So it just, what I could smell, what did it feel like, who was there? Tim, Findel, or Pablo, or Edgar, you guys, are you guys up for a little role playing?
Can I just add one thing, Chris?
Yeah, please.
When it comes to the sensory kind of activity, the intention really, especially if we look at previous experience, is to talk to the limbic system, to the center of emotion within your brain. You know, it's all the amygdala and the hippocampus. And it's basically a recollection of past event, past experience. So what we're trying to do, the idea is to help you remember what the experience was. And by doing this, one thing that I should have said is the area within your brain which will be involved in this activity are pretty much very similar to the actual area within your brain that you will engage while actually doing this activity.
Brilliant. Brilliant. All right. So, Tim, unmute. You're in. You are going to be Fabrice's guinea pig, and you're going to go through a sports performance enhancement little thing real quick.
All right, go for it.
Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
No, I'm very good. I'm very good. So basically, am I understanding this right, Tim? Chris, we're gonna basically do a bit of imagery rehearsal, right?
Yeah, a little role. No, so for example, Fabs, this is your first session. Boom. Couple of questions you'd ask him in your first session to establish it, and then what it would look like in the second session.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and then we can get onto the imagery and stuff like that.
Sure. So, Tim, how are you doing? Good morning. Good afternoon, rather. How are you?
I'm good. Just ready to get my day going.
Good. Nice to see you. Well, listen, let's have a chat, Tim. I mean, you know what I do. I'm happy we can have that conversation. What can I just ask? What actually sport do you do?
I coach soccer.
All right, you coach soccer. Right. I mean, do you come to me with any specific agenda, or is there anything in your coaching soccer that gives you a bit of a challenge, or is it just information you're trying to build, or can I help you with anything specific?
I'm always looking to increase the discipline and focus with my players without taking away the fun involved in the process.
Right. Okay. So how, in this process, how do you go about this? I mean, how do you engage with your crowd? How the communication channel happens and work?
I always try to touch base before practice and see where their emotions are at. And then as the momentum of the practice goes, I try to give some or take some away as it goes. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong.
Okay. I mean, how do you establish whether they enjoy the activity, and how do you establish what sort of feedback they have to give you, just so that you can work on your own?
Generally, it's more just facial expression, but just their overall energy level. If they're enjoying it, the work rate should be high. If they're kind of going through the motions and something, they're either not interested or not happy about something. So.
Okay. I mean, do you work with a small group or is it with a large group? What's the ratio coach to players?
About 1 to 15, 1 to 16.
Right.
Medium
Okay.
group, I guess. Like.
Okay. How do you kind of allow them to enter into the activity then in terms of, you know, enjoyment, readiness to get into the activity?
Can you repeat the first part? It broke up on me. Sorry.
How do you make sure that they come into the activity with the right level of energy? Did you work on that, for instance, or?
No, I don't do anything specific. I trust more like that our warm-up is going to help them get them focused and ready. And then after the warm-up, I try to go from there. But I don't have any special talks or anything.
Okay, so the part of mental preparation, which we're talking, is it more for you or is it more for your players?
I would like it to be for them, but maybe it's for both.
Okay. I mean, Chris, I don't know if this is going in the direction that you want, because I'm not 100% sure whether you want for Tim to be kind of mentally coach or whether that's for his group of players.
No, I think it's important, right? I think we talk about getting players mentally ready, but what do we do as coaches? Right.
Okay.
And who's coaching the coaches, and what are we doing? You know, what are the things we're noticing around that? Are we noticing players? And Tim talked about hopefully the warm-up is getting them ready. Well, the warm-up is getting us physically ready, but how many of us are actually bringing in little things like, okay, as you're warming up, can you feel your breathing, right? So
I got you. Okay. So basically what I would say to this is, if it's about, I mean, you've touched base on the breathing, I would say let's engage with them to firstly establish whether they're going to be in the right physiological state in terms of the breathing. So anything to do with breathing can be associated to the autonomic nervous system. So there's actually two parts. So if you were to get into an activity where you need them to be fully going on right from the start, for instance, I don't know, let's say that it's the end of the session and you go into a game and you want quick tempo. What you could do is you could do a breathing exercise. And with it being said, let's talk about breathing cycle. So if you think about like a 10-second as a breathing cycle, if you want them to be really kind of alert and activated, that's the actual term, then you would want to have them to breathe in for slightly longer periods than they're going to breathe out. So if you take a 10-second portion, let's say you're going to have them breathing in for 6 seconds and breathing out for 4 seconds. The idea is the breathe in is associated to the sympathetic part of our nervous system. The breathing out is associated to the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. The breathing out gives you more relaxation. The breathing in kind of activate your body to get into like a fight or flight mode. So there's actually two sequences. Breathing in, longer period just to activate your body, and breathing out, if it's shorter period, is the opposite. But if you wanted to get them into, at the end of the session, for instance, I would encourage for a breathing out period to be more kind of 6 seconds, and then a breathing in session of about 4 seconds, just so that they can have more of a relaxation. And what you could also do is, let's say it's at the end of the session, you could have them lay down on the floor and then talk to them and say, well, listen, guys, we had a bit of a session today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Can I just ask you to check on your body? So you would do what we call like a body scan. The body scan would consist in you telling them, okay, we are literally on the floor. It's a nice day. We're looking at the sky. It's a blue sky. We can feel the pulse of our hands towards the sky, and then now our legs are stretched out. We're in a pretty relaxed position right now. So let's consider this for maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and then let's breathe in and let's breathe out. So initially, you may ask them to breathe in and breathe out at their own pace. I mean, that take into account that perhaps in a previous session, you would have started to explain not into too complex terms, but breathing in and breathing out. And as they lay on the floor, and then as you make them breathe out, so if you think about it, in terms of cognition, you are allowing them to get out of cognition, get out of their thought system, and then get more into the body. So in terms of worries, in terms of anxiety that they may have, that kind of dissipate itself. And as you do them breathe, you could also invite them to close their eyes for those who are willing to do that. As this sequence is done, you can get into, can I just ask every single one of you to consider something that they've done within this session, which they felt really proud of? Maybe one of them scored a nice goal. Maybe the goalkeeper did a good pass to the left back. Maybe, or whatever the case may be, but get them to get into a situation where they felt good about what they did. So you're going to reinforce, like I said before, the good thing that they did, and with them having their eyes closed. So with them breathing in and out quite naturally, they're in a state of relaxation and they're more open to your suggestion. So your suggestion may be to get them into thinking about what they've done. And then throughout this process, you could also ask them, oh, ask yourself, I mean, when you did that pass, who was around you? Could you see clearly the number 5 or the number 8 or number 10? How was this image? Could you actually feel something? So we can get into that. Ideally, you want them to get to feel something about some of the things that they've done well. We talk about the kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is how you would feel on the inside. So we talk about the emotion. So that's the best to have. If people can sort of start feeling emotion attached to a past experience, you are right on it. But let's not expect that right from the start. But anyway, so you go for the various different sense, and then you allow for them to enjoy this experience of what they've done. So that would be imagery rehearsal based on a past positive experience. But before going into that kind of imagery rehearsal, which includes obviously visualization, which we touched based on Chris, you would want to get them into a more relaxed mode. You know, you don't want to be too kind of greedy. That's what you want, yeah? But you want to get them into a state where they're ready to do that.
So I love that. A lot of rich information. So when you look at a coach, sometimes I think, you know, if we're training 3 times a week, we get 75 minutes, you know, and some people would argue and say, we don't have time, right? Or we can't afford to do this within our training session and lose 5 minutes. I would argue and say we can't afford not to, right? So putting a time frame on that, most coaches in here or on this, or generally who will watch this after, you know, they have 3 teams. So they're going from one practice to another practice to another practice to another practice. And many of the times, I think that as coaches, we are planning for the action as opposed to the interaction, right? And what you're talking about here is very interactive and transformational, right? Which can really, you know, especially in today's times with what everybody's going through, right? So how would you encourage the coaches on this and the coaches that will watch this later to plan for this and allow for this, and what sort of allocating, how do we drip feed this to the players so now it becomes a natural, just like I'm warming up my body, I'm calling down my body. I'm in the action, I'm perceiving, action, perception, coupling, during. How do we now get them to that heightened sensitivity around what we're looking to achieve?
Well, I'd say that touching based on what you just said, Chris, you mentioned transformational. That's exactly it. I think it starts with information. From an informational way of working with the participants, we are aiming to get transformational. But between those two, there's some work to be done. Now, transformational also potentially mean that the player will see a reason to want to do this. So if a player in their journey, see that there's a benefit in doing those sort of exercise, whether it's because it gives them a feel better factor, whether it's because it allows them to gain in confidence, or whatever the case may be, then the player will see an added value doing that. But I think first we must come with the information in view of having a transformation. So I think that's key to mention. The other parts that I would say is we need to remember that every day we work on the physical. I mean, if for football coaches out there, we work on the physical, the tactical, the technical, and obviously there's a psychological corner. Now within that psychological corner, obviously mental preparation belongs to that corner. And I think it depends again on the philosophy of the enterprise. If the philosophy is to allow for some players to get into an excellent status, then I think it's important that we ask ourselves the question. I mean, do we want also people to start working on the mental? And when I say mental, it's not, be strong just mentally and motivational. That's not what I mean. It's having strategies, coping strategies that you can put in front of variables. So if you have a system, if you have something tangible, something like if you take a mathematical equation, I've got variable and I've got consistency. The consistency is pretty much a system. So having a system in place will only help the players cope with some of the challenges that they'll meet later on in life, whether it's in their sports career, whether it's in their everyday life. And at some point, I think with us coming with information and exchanging, they will see the benefit. So I think for coaches out there, I would really ask the question, what do we actually want for our player? Do we work on the short term? Yes, there's 3 teams to look after and we've got a game to prepare. Or do we, in addition to that, do we also look at working on longer term and we investing on something today, which we're going to collect the benefit tomorrow or in a game where we least expect it?
Yeah, and I think that's huge. And, I think, are you familiar with Bill Beswick? Perhaps
yes.
His work. So Bill's a friend. He's been on the webinar too. And remind me, I'll introduce you with him. But he likes to develop what ifs, right? So we're preparing essentially for scenarios. So probably about 10 years ago, I would sit down and I had a group of U12s and I asked them to develop 5 what ifs as a group. What if the referee makes a bad call? What if I get to the field and I forgot my shin guards? What if, and how we handle those things, right? So just having the ability for children or the people that we work with to deal with speed bumps because we've spoke about it, right? And then giving them the strategies to deal with, like you said about the breathing. I think it's important, right?
I think it's key. I mean, we mentioned the breathing, and one data that you guys at the level that you operate, I'm sure would have heard of, is heart rate variability. So heart rate variability, I know it's a technical word, but it's the interval in time between the heartbeats. And if you want to get into a stage where you're more relaxed, then there's actually specific trainings for that. You've got biofeedback machine, but even simplistically speaking, you can have like a Garmin watch, which I was offered by my brother, which is very helpful. You can see basically how your heartbeat, how you can reduce using breathing, your heart speed. And I think that's a tool in itself. And that's quite important and key. So breathing techniques, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but it's so important.
Yeah, and you're spot on. I mean, I was just listening to a podcast the other day somewhere, and it was talking about the Navy SEALs and how they do it. They do 4, breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4 minutes, right? This is part of a Navy SEAL training, but I'm not going to argue with the Navy SEAL Fabs. They talk about breathing, so we're gonna
for sure. And one thing which is also important to know is, without getting too much into the neuroscience, I mean, you're changing the chemistry within your body as well. I mean, it's all within the brain, and it's all an electrical system with signals. And as you consciously breathe, you kind of amplify signal within your heart, and through the vagus nerve that sends signal and that amplifies relaxation within the, the alpha brainwaves within your brain, which is exactly what you need to be in a relaxed mode and to perform at the highest level, which is what golfers or fencers or
mothers in labor. Let's not go there. Yeah, but let's keep it with sports. Yeah, absolutely. So brilliant, Fabs. Like, what simple techniques, or we've given the breathing, we've given the visualization, we've given the tuning into past experience, pleasurable experiences. It was funny because Nico and I spoke about the ones he had shared with you. So we won't share them here, especially the toothbrush one. But we were talking about those and just those moments and tapping into those moments more. But I think what that does is, once we mention things like that, it helps people to be more in the present. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
And just notice things and observe things a little more.
Can I just touch base on this?
Yeah, please.
Sorry.
This is you. This is not me. Don't be sorry, man. You're the
No,
guest.
no.
You're the expert here.
No, I mean, we all experts. I mean, I define myself as someone who's, interested in learning, helping learning
Same
myself. I'm a student.
Here. Yeah.
I'm a student.
Student of life.
I think when it comes to being in the moment, I mean, that's the principle of mindfulness, right? Even if you don't practice it, that's something that could, for some, be obvious. Now, we have to consider something very simple here. In our everyday life, we are going into three mental destinations. One is the past, one is the present, and one is the future. So if you think about, well, actually ask yourself, where do you get the most worries? Is it when you think of the past, the future, or the present? So if everyone, out in the audience ask themselves that question, everyone obviously will come with their own. But one of the...
let's actually put that in the chat. Let's actually ask the audience. Or go ahead. People can just type in. I know Monica's going to have an answer. So the question is, where do you get most of your stress, right? From the past, the present, or the future? For me personally, I think it's when I'm looking to the future is where my stress comes from.
Okay.
For my stresses for my kids, not the past, because I can't change the past.
So I guess it will vary. For some, maybe we'll have, 50% is thinking future. Maybe we'll have another proportion is when they think about the past. But really, we also need to consider, if I'm doing what I'm doing right now with you, which is talking to you, am I generating the same amount of worries than when I'm thinking about the past or the future? If I'm fully focused, if I'm fully in the moment, then I'm actually hypnotized, because I am having a visual with you and my attention is on your question, just the same way your attention is on my answers or the audience. So that's a question people need to ask themselves. And with it being said, if we know that we've got so many thoughts generated by past or future, then I guess we really need to ask ourselves a question. One thing for people to know is every day we have 60,000 thoughts. So if you look at it from a 15 hours day span, it's about 60 thoughts a minute, which is 1 thought a second. But if you think about the right now, like one little story to share is I'm a real keen walker. And when I walk, thankfully, I'm able to kind of free my mind a little bit. And that's the reason why I do this. I do this to kind of escape a little bit, kind of having that thought process drifting too much. So it's an exercise. And again, that's a mental exercise for people out there. As people walk, some people listen to podcasts, some people wander around. Whatever you do, take this as an opportunity perhaps to maybe have your mind resting a little bit and decreasing in terms of the amount of thoughts coming in. And we actually change, brain waves by doing such activities, which is very beneficial.
Yeah, brilliant. I think we, some of the 60,000 thoughts a day, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not sure. So obviously, Fabs, have you delved into metacognition yet, or is that still an area you're
That's still
studying?
an area I've looked at it, but not in a great deal of detail. So I'll let you be the expert on that one.
Pardon? No,
I'll let you be the
no
expert
expert
on that
here.
one.
No, I'm just thinking about thinking. That's metacognition. But I think when we talk about it, and I could be off statistically here, but people tend to look at 60% in the past, 10% in the present, and 30% in the future. And I've got to go back and look with Todd. You know, we had a mindfulness guy on, but just I think you said the important things there was just trying to free your mind, and be ready and be in the moment, right? So many people here, I think, are already probably thinking about, man, what's after this webinar? What do I have next? What do I have the rest of the day? What's for dinner? What's for, you know, just really being keyed into, okay, I'm listening to understand. I'm listening to understand, not to respond, and just being present.
Which is difficult.
It can be.
I mean, put it this way, Chris, it's an exercise. And, you know, no matter who you are, if you haven't exercised perhaps enough, unless you've got maybe natural kind of ability in kind of focusing your mind, you will find it challenging. So with it being said, it's an exercise. So it comes, you know, with practice. The more you practice focusing on the now, the more you become kind of conversant with that kind of activity. And I think it's definitely a challenge for us all, and even more so now, because if you think about mobile phone, if you think about Netflix, all those sources of data and information coming into us, then it gives us maybe less the opportunity to focus, to have the ability to learn how to focus. The reason why I mentioned all of those applications is that this is drifting your mind away. So you want to kind of steer your mind into areas which you may find more challenging, but which ultimately is going to give you perhaps more freedom over your own self. So it's a daily exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where metacognition comes in, right? Thinking about thinking and thinking about the things I want to think about, as opposed to the 10,000 things I have to do. But brilliant. Fabs, what simple advice would you give the people on this to start narrowing in on their own thinking, to then be able to help whoever they're working with, whether it's players, students, whatever they do in their life? How can you help them in their life to help others?
I think, like I said at the beginning, it's all information. I mean, at the very beginning, I would say people have to maybe be willing to explore different avenues, consider perhaps that there's another way of doing things, and then just go and ask some question, or maybe go and start reading, and maybe come to those seminars to have chats, to have exchanges. But it's a daily exercise. It's not something that you can be straight away very good at. You have to apply a certain number of hours, and you'll have to kind of gain ability to concentrate better. So it takes some time. It takes a lot of effort and practice. It's like those 10,000 hours. You went to the Messiah. I think it's Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a lot, that Canadian journalist, about 10,000 hours, like the Beatles. They practiced and practiced and practiced. And the same goes for what we're talking about here. You know, we talk about thoughts. I mean, how do we look at our thoughts? Do we say to ourselves, oh, I don't want to think about that? Or should we say to ourselves, well, this is coming, I'd have to accept it, but I'd have to learn how to manage, how to let that thought be distanced from what I want to think about. So first, you have to be an observant, a bit like the example that you took. You are observing from above. So you're observing your own self, and you're going to learn about how your body reacts to observing your own self. And the same goes for the force that we've spoken about.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Well, are you up for some questions from the audience if they have any?
100%. 100%. Always.
Thank you.
Always.
If you have questions, friends, just unmute and go ahead and ask Fabrice. There doesn't seem to be any questions right now, Fabs. I'm sure someone will unmute in a second. I don't know whether you can hear my background noise. I work in a stadium, Fabs, and they're doing some construction. But while we're doing that, if nobody has any questions, what I want to do is share where to find Fabrice. Fabs, can you see my screen?
Very clear.
Okay, good. I didn't put your phone number up there, but it's there. So, Fabs, is there any questions that I should have asked you and I didn't?
No, I think you pretty much covered it, Chris. I think there's this is an area which is very diverse, and I mean, motivation. We could have touched based on motivation. I mean, how do we motivate those players? And again,
but that's a part two. That was my plan. We're not going to talk about it. Yeah, my plan is to get you back for part two.
Okay. No, I mean, there's, like I said, let's go with it gradually, and you know, it's a learning, it's a journey. It's not just about what we want to get to the result of it right now. So,
yeah, listen, it is a journey, right? Is it? Somebody asked me, is it the journey or is it the destination? And my response was, no, it's the people we're riding with, right? So yes, it's about the journey. It could be about the destination, but it's about the company we have along the way. And, you know, I just feel blessed. You know, 25 years ago, we met in a park in Elmhurst, Chicago, you from France, me from England. And there we were thrown together, united by our common love of teaching and football. Yeah. You know, and, you know, trying to help people be the best version of themselves. So, Chico, you look like you had a question there, all the way from Colombia.
Not at the time, Chris.
Not today?
No, not today.
Yeah. Brilliant. Monica's got a hand raised. Monica, go ahead and unmute, please.
Hello. One question for you, Fabs. Share with us in your journey up until now, share with us a moment where you said, like, yes, this is what I was, you know, looking for. You know, this is the moment, you know, when you have helped somebody.
Monica, that's easy. That's when you met me.
Oh,
we were in the Crowbar in Chicago. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry. Let's ask Vanessa too, you know, like what she thinks.
Yeah, no, go Fabs.
I think for me, it was really about discovering that my passion is what we're here to talk about today. I think it took me a while. It took me a bit of needing a bit of help to find myself. It was obvious, but at the same time, I didn't apply the right changes to be in front of what was so obvious. So I had to kind of listen to what Vanessa was saying to me and saying, well, you should go and start coaching. I mean, it's obvious, you've played football all your life. And I think if it wasn't for that moment, I wouldn't be here because I would not have started coaching. I know it's not good looking at it retrospectively like this, but I think that's what it was about. It's a moment. And I think every one of us will perhaps be in front of that kind of moment where maybe there's signals, maybe there's indicators, maybe there's kind of flash. And it's whether we're going to be able to pick up those signals and then apply changes to come and basically meet our destiny. I 100% believe that this is what I was made to do, work with young athletes. And I'm not saying helping young athletes, working with athletes, working with coaches, teams, just to help and just to ask ourselves a few questions about performance and how we can, you know, optimize performance. So to answer the question, I'd say it's about moment, and my moment was during my career break.
Brilliant. Emmanuel, go ahead and unmute. Emmanuel's got his hand up. You can go ahead and unmute, Emmanuel.
All right. Greetings, guys.
Emmanuel, where are you coming from in the world?
I'm coming from Ghana. That's where I'm coming from.
Fantastic, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Fabs if, with all of this information that one has to know, and then you don't have it around you, but you, the person or athlete or coach, that you want to seek this information by yourself, but yet you don't understand it yourself. How are you going to go about it?
That's a good question. I'm not even sure I've got all the answers for that. I think I would say, Emmanuel, that again, it's about trying to go and fish for information or fish for the right people and picking up those signals around you. Sometimes, I mean, the advice could come from an uncle. Sometimes the advice could come from a neighbor. And it doesn't have to come from a sports performance coach. But I think it's about picking up those signals, be inquisitive, wanting to have information coming. So it's like you almost need to be willing to get into a stage where you're going to be less comfortable. If we're comfortable with what we do every single day, I'd say that there's maybe a little bit missing. We need to meet what's not comfortable so that we then discover about ourselves. And something that we didn't touch about, Chris, is neuroplasticity. Up until the age of 25, for you guys out there, you've got plenty of room for your nervous system to kind of expand and to kind of have new experiences and to kind of grow. After 25, you can still do it, but it's a little bit more difficult. So I would say, if you are in a life where everything is so easy and comfortable, I know everyone's got their challenges, then ask yourself, is it not too much of an easy ride? And what do I need to do to make that ride a little bit more challenging? Do I need to start reading a little bit? Do I need to research? Or what else could I consider doing? So I think it's a good question. And yeah, it's about, be broad, be willing, and ask yourself many questions.
I think just to add to what you said there, Fabs, for Emmanuel, is knowing what you don't know, but then trying to find avenues to keep learning and finding those things out, whether you're reading about it, whether you're talking to people, whether you're having a conversation with Fabs, or whether it's another sports performance, enhancer, just reading things, asking people, well, what works for you? Because everybody's different, right? And there's no, might work for Fabrice may not work for you, Emmanuel,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's a lot to digest. There's a lot of consideration in all this. But again, have a look at yourself and ask yourself, is it not too much of an easy ride? What can I do to make that ride more challenging? Yeah.
Brilliant. Did I answer your question, Emmanuel?
Yes, definite.
Brilliant. So, Fabs, we're coming to the end. An hour has flown by. It flew by yesterday too. If there's further questions, please, you have Fabrice's email right here. We have his Instagram. He's an Instagram nut, to be fair. He's got a website there too. If people are too shy and want to think of questions afterwards, Fabrice is very good, very personable. We've maintained a relationship for 25 years. We lost touch for a little bit, but when I visited England, he came to see me in Birmingham with his wife and his daughter, met my boys back then. And it's just about, establishing those relationships and continuing to be surrounded by good people and stuff like that. So
thanks a lot, Chris. Really appreciate it. I mean, I return everything. I mean, we know we go a long way. So, we've seen a few things, you and I. So
yeah.
Interesting journey again.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that I would add, Chris, is let's consider the sleep, the way we sleep.
Yeah, I like that.
It's very important factor.
So
how do we sleep?
So quick story. I was just listening to the Greatest Game podcast, and it was Jamie Carragher with Roberto Martinez, and he was discussing Vincent Kompany. And they were about to play Brazil, and Vincent Kompany wasn't sleeping well. So he took something to help him sleep, but then woke up the next morning, had a great night's sleep, but he'd missed the set plays meeting before the Brazil game. So Thierry Henry took time to meet with Vincent Kompany one-on-one and Vincent Kompany scored the first goal against Brazil from a corner kick on a header, I think. So just, you know, finding those things. Chico, you got a question there. He's got his hand raised. Edgar did have a question. I knew he had one before he did. I was thinking that in the future as opposed to being in the present. Go,
Yeah,
Chico.
I rather do it right now than later start writing in English. That is not my best skill. So I'm better talking than writing. So my question is, at what age do you recommend we as a club start working with our kids on all of this mental preparation?
Okay, as soon as possible. I think with age, I'd say 8. You could start with 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and just go with the basic at the very beginning. Have them lay down, have them breathing in and out to start with, have them closing their eyes, sort of thing. But you can start quite early. You don't need to, in my opinion at least, you don't need to wait until they're 13 or 14, because what you want to do is you want to have imprints in their minds. And the more imprints you have of them having that kind of experience, then the more chance you have for those data to be kind of acquired. So the earlier, the better. Of course, you'll face a challenge is then being able to concentrate. So you can work, you know, within short spells of maybe 5 minutes at the end of the session or at the beginning of the session. But yeah, 8-year-old, even 6. I mean, I've done it for 6-year-old when I was coaching indoor football, and it works really well. I mean, they really like the routine, and they love it. Initially, it's a bit strange for them, but then after a while, they get into a routine, and you can make it playful as well.
Brilliant. Great advice. Which is our core value this month as well. Fabs, any closing words?
No, I mean, thanks for having me, Chris, again. Thanks for everyone joining in. I know there's some people from France. I hope that they'll be able to understand. I'll translate some of it. No, thanks very much. I'm so grateful for everything, and let it continue.
I think I missed the first 10 minutes of recording, Fabs. So I had too much going on at the beginning. I was just trying to make sure the technology works.
Don't
so
worry.
We might have to video the introduction.
Don't worry. There's worse things in life. Don't worry.
Yeah. Brilliant. Everybody, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you soon. We will release the recording. I'll send it to you through the emails that you use to register. Fabrice, you've been brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody who joined us live. Thanks everybody who will watch this later. Be well, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, Chris. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.